So as artists, we have two really important tools at our disposal. Number one is our mind, the ability to think and to imagine and to create. That is our most important tool. So we should do everything we can to keep our brain in good shape. Number two, as a painter, is squinting. So, why would I say squinting is such an important tool? We use it all the time. If you watch professional artists, especially those who do landscape painting, you'll notice that as soon as they get out on location somewhere, the first thing they do is to start squinting like this. So, let me tell you what this does and how to do it correctly. First of all, here's how you do squinting. You're just closing your eyes until your eyelashes. Now, if somebody doesn't have eyelashes, it might make it a little bit more complicated, but I think most of us have eyelashes. And that's what we're working with. The eyelashes are kind of like a screen on a screen door on your front door. This is what you're looking for. Think about a front door. If you have your front door open wide and you're looking out at everything, you see everything just clear as can be. You see all the colors, you see all the values, you see how light it is, you see the shadows, how dark they are. Now close the screen door and try to look through the screen. You notice how everything gets more diffused. You can't see all the details very clearly. The lights get darker. The dark's usually about the same, but everything kind of melds together a little bit. It merges into more distinct light and value and shapes and that sort of thing. That's what we're doing with our eyelashes. We're just creating a screen right there. So what it does when we squint down, and you're not squinting down until you can't see anything, because then that doesn't do us much good. We might as well just fall asleep. So we just squint them down until all we see are light and dark. What are we going for when we squint? We're going for value relationships. Don't think of squinting as something where you're going to see the values correctly or you're going to see colors or anything like that. It's going to distort both of those. So we're not looking for correct values. We can see that when we open our eyes wide open. And we aren't going to see colors accurately either. We also, if we want to see colors correctly, we want to open our eyes and look at the colors. But what happens when we squint is we get rid of little tiny details that can be distracting. So like we're looking at a tree. It's got let's say an aspen tree or any tree with a bunch of leaves all over it. And then let's say the wind is blowing a little bit, so those leaves are rustling around and moving. Well, when those leaves are rustling around and moving like that, we'll see some of those are catching the light. They're turning like this, and they catch the light, and we get the light shines right on it at just the right angle that it becomes really bright because the light is reflecting off of it, and it's so bright looking. And then we see other leaves that are turned away from the light completely, and they're in the shadow, and they're very dark. They just look like a little dark object in there. And we've got thousands of those things happening in there. Just little bits of bright light, little spots of dark accents everywhere, just all over the place. And if we look at that with our eyes wide open and we try to paint that, it's going to take forever. We're going to go crazy thinking, I've got so many of these little tiny things to do in this painting. And if we're out on location, that's not going to work because the light is going to change in a matter, light is changing all the time. Every moment the earth is rotating and the light is changing a little bit. But dramatically that light, the shadows are going to shift, the light is going to change dramatically every 5, 10, 20 minutes. So we are really working against time. And if we try to do all those little tiny details, we don't have that kind of time. So we've got to simplify things. We've got to make it easier to digest, easier to get down onto a painting quickly, so we get the most essential elements that will make what we're seeing translate successfully to our viewer. What are the most important things in this scene that make the scene what it is? Now, when we go to finish a painting, we might put in a bunch of little details, little bits of highlighted leaves or dark accents in spots here and there. And those can make the painting a lot of fun. We can have a lot of fun doing those things. In looking at a painting like this, I had to look and see where were my darkest values, like in some of the areas down here in the shadows, up here in the tree here, in these areas, some dark elements around in here, up in this area, up in here. So when I'm, the first thing I want to establish when I go to paint is what's my darkest dark, the darkest shapes, the darkest dark areas, the darkest values in my painting. And then what are the lightest values in the painting? Is it the sky up here, the clouds maybe? Or is it the leaves on the trees? And if I'm looking out at a scene when I'm actually there on location, that can be difficult to determine when my eyes are wide open. Because when I see certain colors, they look very bright. But oftentimes they look more bright than they actually are. So I have to figure out, is that yellow leaf right there that's twinkling in the light, is it really as bright as it looks? Is it as bright as the sky up here? Or as this cloud over here? Which one of those is a lighter value? Which one of them just looks bright because it looks bright? Squinting can help me to figure that out. Because if I squint down, then suddenly all of the little detail disappears, and I get an overall sense of where the lightest values are in the biggest shapes and where the darkest values are in the biggest shapes of dark values. So it gets rid of, like, this area right here would all just become one big shape. A lot of the little detail would disappear. Even if I squinted this painting right now, I can get rid of a lot of the little detail and take those objects, the spaces in here, and turn them into bigger shapes, more condensed shapes. So I'm trying to reduce the value range to where I see the darkest dark, the lightest light, and I'm trying to reduce all those little shapes into bigger shapes that are approximately about the same value with each other. And then I can take these shapes like in here, and I can see how they relate, or how bright are those areas right there relative to the brightest area in my painting, or the brightest value I see when I'm squinting down, and how dark are these shadows over here compared to the shadows in the tree over here, or the shadows over in these areas, or shadows in a bush over here. How dark is this compared to this? And then once I have those relationships down, what I'm doing is I'm relating this dark value to this dark value and seeing which one is darker and how much darker this one is down here than this one over here. So once I have those value relationships established on where my lightest light is, my darkest dark, everything else then I will keep within that relationship once I start painting. So then I don't get confused. If I think, when I squint down, if I notice that the aspen trees are actually lighter than the sky up above because the sun is shining right on them and the sky tends to be darker than the aspen trees, then I know to keep the aspen trees lighter than in value than the sky. But if I see it the other way around, then I'll know that when I'm painting the aspen trees and I want to get them, they feel like they need to be brighter, I'll know not to make them so bright that they're brighter than the sky. If I saw when I was squinting that they were actually darker than the sky. That's a relationship that I'm keeping. And I want to maintain that throughout the rest of the painting. It'll help me to not get confused by the little details. And it'll help me to keep my value relationships accurate and stronger. What that does is it actually strengthens the overall painting if I can do that. And it's not an easy thing to do. That's why squinting is something that we want to practice all the time. Everywhere I go. Doesn't matter if I'm driving with my wife to the grocery store or I'm out on a walk, or I'm sitting in church and I'm looking around me at people in there, or I'm looking out of a window to the things that are outside. I'm always squinting. I'm always doing this because it just becomes second nature. Everywhere I go, I start squinting to see value relationships, to see my lightest light, my darkest dark, and to see how the other values around them that aren't the darkest dark and the lightest light, how they relate to those that I established, the lightest light and the darkest dark. What's the relationship of them? How dark are these compared to this darkest dark down here? How much lighter are they than the darkest dark? How much darker are these other lights in here compared to the lightest light? That's the kind of relationships that I'm trying to form. Then I know when I start painting not to get anything lighter than this area. This area that I knew when I was squinting was the lightest light area. And I know not to get any of the shadows in here darker than this darkest dark that I had down here when I was squinting. So that's what squinting does. So just keep practicing. Just squint down your eyes until you can still see everything, but everything becomes a little bit darker. The lights are going to get actually darker when we squint, and the darks will probably remain about the same. You'll see the darkest darks will stay dark. The lightest lights will actually get a little darker, but the lightest light will still, it'll make it easier for us to, getting rid of all that little detail that's out there, it'll make it easier for us to see bigger shapes and see which of the bigger shapes is the brightest, the lightest shape in our painting or in our scene that we're looking at. So remember, squinting is one of your best friends as a painter. It is indispensable. It is so useful when we're out on location, or even if we're in our studio painting from a still life, or we're painting a portrait or anything else. Even if we're using photographs, it can be very useful even when we're doing photographs. Photographs are a little more complicated because photographs lie. They don't give us as accurate of information when it comes to light and dark as what we get when we're looking at it in real life. But we can still use the same principle of squinting even when we're working from a photograph. So remember, practice, practice, practice squinting. Just barely reduce your eyes until your eyelashes just barely come together and they form this little screen over your eyes so that it filters out a lot of the light that we're seeing. We don't have as much light coming in, so our brain isn't getting as much information coming in, and so all we see it helps to make all the small little shapes much bigger. It brings them into one big shape, all these little shapes, and it helps us to see all the big shapes of value within our paintings. All right, so have fun. Enjoy squinting for the rest of your life as a painter everywhere that you go. and just get used to the strange looks that you're going to get. All right, have fun. Happy painting. Squinting, yes, when you're out in location and you're around other people, they're probably going to look at you a little strange, think that you have something wrong with your eyes, or you're upset or something. You get all kinds of reactions from people when it comes to squinting. But it's worth it. It's worth it. So no matter what kind of strange looks you get from others, just keep doing it. I squint all the time, and sometimes I don't realize I'm squinting at somebody because they just kind of get in the way of whatever I'm looking at.